Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How B2B Marketers Turn Event Moments into Measurable Pipeline, produced by Marketing Profs and sponsored by StackAdapt. I'm Jeffrey Thomas, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. Now, before we begin, a few updates and housekeeping notes. If you experience any audio or visual problems, please try to refresh the page or log out and log back in. If you're on Wi-Fi or if you have multiple applications open, it could impact your viewing experience. So when in doubt, close it out. Check out the right-hand side panel for some fun engagement options. You can use the chat to connect with fellow marketers, and you can reply and send reactions to other comments by hovering over them. Please use the Q&A tab just below chat to submit questions for our speakers today. In there, you can also upvote your favorite questions, and as soon as the presentation is done, we'll get to as many questions as we can, and we'll start with the most popular. There is a PDF of the deck available to download in the Resources tab just below Q&A. And if you look to the bottom of your screen, you'll see an emoji button. Feel free to share your reactions throughout today's event. I'd like to take a minute to thank StackAdapt for sponsoring today's webinar. StackAdapt is the leading AI-powered platform that helps marketers reach, engage, and convert audiences with precision. With 465 billion optimizations per second, the StackAdapt Marketing Platform connects brand and performance efforts to drive measurable results across programmatic and owned media marketing channels. Now, please join me in welcoming Nick Ortega and Anshul Bajaj, who are presenting how B2B marketers turn event moments into measurable pipeline. Nick is the Director of Digital Out-of-Home and Emerging Channels at StackAdapt. Nick helps advertisers harness digital out-of-home's unique blend of scale, targeting, and impact. His work focuses on programmatic guaranteed private marketplace and always-on strategies that connect brands with real-world audiences. Anshul is Senior Manager of Verticals and Performance at StackAdapt, specializing in helping clients use programmatic strategies to meet advertising goals and attribute the impact of their media dollars. She focuses on shaping the future of ABM across targeting, measurement, and analytics. And with that, I'm going to hand it over. Nick and Anshul, please take it away.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Hi, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Nick, and we are absolutely thrilled to be here today and share how B2B marketers are taking advantage of real-world presence during critical industry events and turning that into measurable pipeline growth through digital out-of-home and ABM. So just to back up, at StackAdapt, we've spent over a decade helping brands and agencies make programmatic work smarter. We are a privately held company that has grown over 700% in the past 4 years, operating across 4 continents with more than 1,500 employees. What sets us apart is how we've built AI and machine learning into the foundation of everything that we do to maximize performance and time to value for our customers. Whether you're running campaigns self-serve, managed service, or via API, we're here to make every channel, including digital out-of-home, perform. We've seen a massive rise in event-based digital out-of-home activations here at StackAdapt, up 300% year over year. And the question we always ask is why? And it's because conferences are where B2B decision makers, thought leaders, and industry participants are hyper engaged and concentrated in a specific location for a limited amount of time. According to Event Marketer, event budgets are on the rise. 74% of Fortune 1000 marketers were expected to increase experiential and event marketing spending in 2025. When brands surround these moments with smart, location-based creative, they can extend the value of event and booth sponsorships, drive awareness among target accounts, and start warming buying committees before the first handshake even happens. Nothing quite gives validity to a brand than engaging customers throughout a B2B event in the real world, enabling brands to break through the noise of that event. Let's get right into it. We have a lot to get through in this short amount of time. So let's talk with step 1, planning. Now, as most marketers know, any good campaign really starts with defining your goals. And a good event activation strategy starts there as well. So what does success look like for your brand or your client? Are you looking to drive booth traffic, tracking engagement to a landing page, driving awareness of your brand or a new product, or retargeting key accounts post-events, etc.? It's important to establish your goals up front, identify the events you'd like to focus on throughout the year, and have a potential budget in mind so you can actually rationalize what an actual goal and campaign could look like. Now, one of the most exciting things about digital out of home today is how versatile it is. It has the ability to combine the best of both worlds: impactful real world presence and digital agility. You can activate across airports, transit hubs, taxis, hotels, office buildings, restaurants and bars, and even in room hotel screens. Each environment plays a different role in your story. An airport ad might spark awareness and provide brand credibility, while an elevator or hotel room ad might remind them to visit your booth at the local conference. It's about surrounding your audience with relevant, memorable moments that ladder up to your brand story or campaign goals. The next is mapping out your key digital out of home locations. These are some examples of top digital out of home locations requested from us as we help our customers develop media plans around events. These are the locations which will hit your audiences at specific touch points during an event. Please note, clients typically have preferences on locations, and it's important to understand them up front. For example, airport is very popular. This location is a great fit for brands looking to hit event attendees as they arrive and depart the conference. Some other examples would be transit hubs. So we know folks aren't just arriving in airports to these events. Local folks could be coming in through different thoroughfares such as subway, train, and even highways used to get to the event. And then another popular one is going to be venues within close proximity to an event location. So think high impact screens immediately around the event location or in local hotspots, driving event attendees when they're outside of the actual conference. Where are they going? So at this point, we've established our campaign goals, identified an event location, dates, high level budget, and narrowed down our selection of venues and locations. One of the most powerful advantages of programmatic digital out of home is precision targeting and flexibility. You could layer in geography, day parting, weather triggers, venue type, media owner, and even third party B2B audience segments. It's no longer just about being seen, it's about being seen by the right people at the right time in the right place. We'll touch on this a bit later, but it's important to know that targeting, although super effective, does limit your supply. So it will be important to understand max avails and scale based on your targeting to feel confident in assigning a budgetary amount, which leads perfectly into forecasting. So before you even launch, using forecasting tools to identify event attendee corridors, understanding potential reach, impressions, and cost are super critical for you to be able to understand exactly how much budget you can allocate. For example, you may want to know what inventory is located within a half mile of the event location. You could then further filter down to specific venue types and media owners to better understand the makeup of the inventory that's actually present around that event location, or other popular hotspots like airports, transit hubs, or like what we were talking about before, like the local hotspots that people would be going to after the event. In terms of a few campaign best practices, it's really all about planning early. These events sell out. There's a lot of screens that are in high demand, and you have to really plan months in advance for some of these larger events. If you're talking CES, AWS reInvent, like we just heard earlier before this call, much inventory around AWS reInvent is sold out in terms of like the direct IO inventory. So really the only way to access that is going to be through programmatic channels, and that's if there's even avails there. So planning early is super critical. We recommend some of these larger ones like an AWS reInvent or a CES, you're talking 3 to 4 months in advance. The next is around creative specs. So many of our clients that we work with, they either might not have like a dedicated out of home team or a creative team. And it's really important to understand, what does it all entail? If you start selecting all these different screens that look super attractive and really hit all of your goals and what you're looking to do, sometimes we find that creative can be a barrier. So it's really important to understand you can have many different variations. The next is really to create a strategy based on the goals and the inventory selection. So you want to understand, where am I hitting these audiences? Is it when they're landing? Is it as they're exiting the airport and they're looking for taxis and you want to be running on taxi tops? It's really understanding how your audience is going to be moving throughout this event and where you want to show up as a brand. The next is about reserving inventory. So as I had mentioned before, inventory does sell out, especially on some of these more marquee events. It's super important to understand like what you really want, and being able to reserve inventory up front is sometimes super important. And we'll talk a bit more about that soon. Now, digital out of home offers some of the best creative canvases in the world. My biggest feedback here is take advantage and personalize your messaging to the environment, and always take advantage of subtle or full motion elements to draw attention. The next is, once programmatic digital out of home campaigns are live, it's really important to monitor and optimize delivery, as programmatic inventory is not guaranteed. So you need to be fluid with your budgets and understanding, hey, we might need to shift budget to this venue or expand the geo target radius targeting, so on and so forth. When you're running programmatic digital out of home, you really need to think about it being flexible, and budget should be fluid. It's not programmatic guaranteed. It's not IO where you have these locked in reserved inventory type buys. And so now this kind of leads me to buying and optimizing. So we talked a little bit about direct IO and programmatic. So these are the two primary means to transact on digital out of home inventory around events. Direct IO is needed to secure high demand or non-programmatically accessible inventory. So an example of that is Las Vegas Airport. The inventory that's made available through one of our partners, Lamar, is not available programmatically. So the only way to show up in the airport on these great screens and inventory is to buy it direct IO. And this is guaranteed inventory, and it's purchased based on spots in a loop. So it's akin to buying share of voice. So it's not CPM based. It's different than what programmatic is. So for example, if you bought one 10-second spot in a 100-second loop, you would be buying 10% share of voice, 10 divided by 100. Now you are buying a fixed placement in a rotation. So it's guaranteeing that share of voice, and it's going to be reoccurring. You know, your ad is going to show up in that loop over and over and over. Programmatic is different. It's bought on a CPM, and it's not guaranteed unless if you do programmatic guaranteed, but it's still early days there. We have some media owners who are sophisticated enough to set up programmatic guaranteed buys and some that are not. So it's somewhat of a mixed bag there. So we often defer to buying IO in those scenarios where we need to reserve inventory ahead of time. How you access this inventory is super important to understand, as it will directly impact your targeting flexibility, budget allocation, creative versioning, etc. What we have found is there's real power and opportunity in combining both direct IO and programmatic. So you use direct IO to lock in that scarce, high traffic inventory in critical locations, and then you layer in programmatic for that flexibility and scale beyond just those marquee locations, high demand screens. If we zoom into programmatic specifically, which is more of our forte, programmatic optimizations to be made mid-flight for event-based activations.
Sorry, I don't understand.
That was my Apple Watch. There's a few different levers at your disposal, which can be adjusted in real time. So if pacing is low or KPIs are lagging, you can adjust bids, expand geos, or shift day parts. Think of it as active optimization in the physical world. We recommend starting broad and fine tuning as you go to more narrowly target locations, audiences, times, etc. Programmatic inventory available through PMPs, again, is not guaranteed. And while forecasts that we do are semi-accurate, it's really important to know that IO and PG, programmatic guaranteed buys, that media owners are receiving up to the actual event will always take precedence over your PMP or open exchange buys. Meaning that inventory, although it showed up in forecasting last week, the media owner could have sold the majority of it a couple days before the event, and you're kind of in this odd or challenging place to be. And that's why it's super important to have fluidity amongst your budgets if you're looking to run programmatic only. All right, I just shared a lot, so let's recap. This is kind of like your blueprint. So if I had to boil it down into 3 distinct points, it would be plan and buy strategically. Define your goals, understand the buying methods that you're looking to use, 2 is going to be defining your event attendee corridors by using forecasting and selecting your venue and location preferences. And then 3 is all going to be about maximizing your creatives. How do you map your creatives to these specific corridors from airport to hotel to venue, and making sure that it follows along that journey for that user? That's how you surround your audience throughout the entire event journey. And the folks at StackAdapt are ready to provide guidance as you start to plan for your next event or annual event planning activities. All right, now let's talk about when event attendees return home. Here's where it gets kind of exciting. So after the event, the story doesn't end. We always recommend digital out-of-home retargeting to further drive users down the funnel. So by capturing device IDs from people who are exposed to your digital out-of-home ads, whether that be direct IO or programmatic, yes, StackAdapt can retarget users exposed to direct IO buys and programmatic digital out-of-home campaigns all underneath one roof. So the people who saw your brand at the airport or near the venue, you can continue to engage with them digitally after the event. So you can retarget those same decision makers, thought leaders across channels, whether that be native, display, video, audio, and CTV. Imagine someone sees your brand in the airport and on their way to the conference, then here's a audio ad through Spotify on their mobile device. And then when they get home, they're actually seeing ads for your same brand on CTV. That's how you turn these real world impressions into real opportunities. So with digital out of home, exposure doesn't stop at the screen. It starts this digital journey. So we can retarget these exposed audiences across devices to keep the message consistent. We can activate that within 24 to 48 hours of exposure to remain top of mind. And this audience is now available in the StackAdapt platform for activation when you need it next, enabling marketers to integrate digital out of home touch points into one consistent journey, reinforcing brand impact and driving measurable outcomes. Now I'll pass the mic to Anshul to talk more about how ABM comes into play here.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. I think that was a lot of really critical and exciting information on how you can start leveraging digital out of home as a broad strategy. But thinking about how that ties into a very specific account-based strategy is what I really want to focus on for the next little bit. So when you think about B2B advertising or just account-based strategies in general, one of the biggest challenges is that sales cycles are very long and complex. We really want to figure out how to be top of mind for our advertisers and for our brands to ensure that the target accounts that we're reaching actually see and remember us before we do an actual outreach. So that's really where digital out of home can really be your secret weapon and a very unique approach actually to building a connection between brand to demand. So let's try to break this down. I think we can stay on the previous slide. Awesome.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So first of all, digital out of home, like Nick talked about, can really allow you to surround priority accounts along their real world journey, like we talked about. So that means you can reach those decision makers very specifically, not just when they're online, but also when they're commuting or attending conferences or just moving through business hubs. This is what we talked about a lot. It's really about that consistent brand presence in environments where your audience is actually spending time. You can also then help warming up those buying committees before your sales team actually does that outreach and sets up those meetings. So by serving those very strategic, very high impact messages in physical spaces, we can build that familiarity and trust before those meetings happen or before those conversations start. I think that recognition is really going to help shorten those sales cycles and improve your response rates when the outreach actually happens. And lastly, digital out of home can actually really give you the ability to connect that offline effort back into online campaigns with a very unique ABM lens post event. So, one way to do that would be to capture event attendees and then retarget them through programmatic channels. So, for example, imagine running a digital billboard campaign around an industry conference. You would reach the attendees that are actually there in person. And then what you can do is continue that engagement online through digital, native, or CTV ads once they've actually gone home. So out of home can really help strengthening those ABM strategies by connecting the physical and the digital to make that advertising feel human, even for business buyers. You can really surround your accounts, warm them up, and keep them engaged across multiple touch points. So now that we've talked about how out of home can help you surround and engage your target accounts, the next step would be turning that awareness into meaningful engagement. I think now we can go to the next slide. Awesome. So the goal here really is to turn that brand awareness and visibility that you've built into that measurable engagement and sales momentum. There's a few different ways you can start thinking about this, but this is a really good framework that I like to think about. So the first step would be to figure out how to actually build that retargeting audience with that ABM lens on top. So one way to do that would be based on the leads or the accounts that you connected with at these events, at the meetings, at the conferences. You can then start to use that information to build an ABM retargeting list that you can continue engaging with after the event. So you wouldn't just be building a broad retargeting strategy, you would actually be honing in your retargeting strategy specifically on the accounts that engage with you at the event. You can also layer on additional parameters in the digital space, such as intent or technographic, really to hone in on the businesses that you know care about your product in the programmatic landscape, ensuring that you're focusing your spend on accounts that are both relevant but are also showing real-time buying signals. The next thing you can do is really start orchestrating your journey flow. So this is where you can start mapping your key personas and then tailoring your messaging according to those personas. In the buying committee, in the decision maker group, each persona has very different priorities and very different roles in that process. So you really want to think about how you can build a curated strategy to reach the IT decision maker differently from the marketing decision maker, differently from the finance decision maker. You can also start planning your media strategy more effectively, potentially holding out 10 to 20% of your budget so that downstream you can really double down on accounts that are showing those higher engagements and make optimizations as your campaigns progress. This can also be a really, really great way to build stronger marketing and sales alignment. What ABM measurement and reporting tools can help you do is identify those key accounts that are demonstrating stronger engagement across the different channels, and then use those insights to help sales prioritize their outreach, help them prioritize their messaging, and then really ultimately the goal being shortening that path to conversion. And then finally, measurement and optimization should always be top of mind along that whole journey. Not only do you really want to find ways to visualize your account engagement through ABM dashboards and ABM measurement tools across the different touch points like display or CTV, whatever channels you might choose to retarget your audience, but then to really track that spend and reach at both the segment level and the account level so that you can start promoting what's performing best. You can really focus in on optimizing and refining your audience splits, creatives, bidding strategies all throughout the campaign, using that 10 to 20% reserve budget from the beginning to start making those mid-flight optimizations at the account level. So this approach will really, really help you to kind of close that loop in connecting that real world exposure from digital out of home with very precise engagement and measurable outcomes at the account level for B2B advertising. It's a really great way to connect branding dollars with lower funnel lead gen focused campaigns that a lot of B2B marketers are focused on. On the next slide, we can show you a really quick example of how that looks like at StackAdapt. This is what our StackAdapt ABM measurement reporting looks like. It will really, really help you understand and deep dive into how B2B professionals and accounts are engaging with your ads. It can help you visualize account level progress, understand engagement, make optimizations, and then really start prioritizing your sales efforts and help quantify the ROI of your marketing dollars. Essentially, ultimately, digital out of home and ABM work best when they're connected. Out of home can help you build those top of funnel awareness and real world visibility, while B2B will help you turn that awareness to drive targeted engagement and measurable pipeline downstream. Together, I think they're a really, really strong way to create a seamless and full funnel strategy that will reach your priority accounts everywhere they are. It'll help you hone in your strategy to ensure that you're reaching and you're spending your dollars online tied to that real world awareness impact that you made through digital out of home. Back to you, Nick.
Cool, thank you. All right, so since we're talking about reporting, let's talk about digital out of home reporting. So one of the biggest myths I think about digital out of home is that I often hear it's hard to report on, it's hard to measure. At StackAdapt, every programmatic digital out of home campaign comes with screen level heat map reporting, including detailed reporting at the venue, media owner, and even all the way down to the screen level. So if you want to know how many impressions did I deliver to the baggage claim screen in JFK that I ran during a specific event, this is all possible. And so this is what it looks like in our platform, and you can zoom in and out. Obviously, this is a static image, so you can't zoom in and out, but you can kind of get the idea. And then when we talk about measurements, so moving beyond just reporting, when it comes to measuring digital out of home performance, StackAdapt offers a suite of measurement offerings, such as online lift analysis, which helps you to understand how digital out of home exposure drives real digital actions like website visitation or white paper downloads or other pixel-based conversion opportunities. Brand lift, this is a popular one where we evaluate how digital out of home improves brand awareness, perception, and recall among exposed and non-exposed audiences, so you can can measure the lift. And then footfall analysis, I would say this is less used in the event space, but is an offering that we provide where you connect digital out-of-home exposure to a site visitation. And then I guess just to wrap it up, to bring it all together, here's how to make digital out-of-home a high-performing part of your event and ABM strategy. So first, we talked about all this before. You're going to be planning corridors and buying hybrid, ideally. Think of the journey as one connected path from, say, the airport to the hotels to the event location. It's critically important to lock in high-value screens with direct IOs as early as possible and scale your reach programmatically to hit the right audience at the right time with engaging and relevant creative. Second is using ABM and digital out-of-home retargeting as your secret weapon. So you're combining precise ABM targeting with digital out-of-home exposure and retargeting to move prospects through the funnel, turning awareness into real engagement and action. And then finally, measure everything. Use performance insights and measurement offerings to understand the impact across digital out-of-home, ABM, and retargeting campaigns in one place. So you can optimize and scale to understand what works best ultimately for your next activation. At this point, we will pause and open it up to Q&A.
All right. Thank you very much. That was a great presentation, really interesting. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Anshal. Let's get to some questions here. Audience, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A tab located on the right-hand side panel, and you can upvote the questions that you want answered the most. So with that, top question is digital out-of-home only top of funnel? Have you seen it move mid-funnel metrics or meeting creation?
So I think it's often used for upper funnel, especially around events. We have a number of clients that come to us and are like, we want to make a big splash. We want to drive awareness around a new product offering, or we are in a super competitive industry and we want to break free from all the noise that happens around these events and really have our brand shine. So there's certainly an awareness upper funnel strategy that happens quite often in the event space. I will say, especially with more direct IO buys where you are guaranteed share of voice, there's opportunities to go more mid to lower funnel where you can actually engage with that unit, meaning QR codes are kind of like, what's old is new again. And I've actually been really impressed with how your phone has been able to pick up QR codes from longer distances. I think many years ago that was not the case. And that advancement alone has helped customers kind of get digital out of home to more of a mid-funnel opportunity where you can engage, scan a QR code, and get that engagement. So that's typically where I see it. We also have a number of brands who will use digital out of home ultimately to drive folks to their booth. So still an awareness vehicle, but very much trying to drive somebody further down the funnel, but in this example, actually driving them to your booth at the event, which you're spending money to ultimately have that space. So it's super important to drive folks there.
Yeah, right. Next question is, for post-event nurture with an attendee list, how would you blend that list with ABM attributes such as seniority or function and sequence the next 14 days to move accounts into meetings?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different ways to do this. I think the interesting thing that the online, the digital aspect of the ABM targeting will really allow you to do is, now that you know which of the businesses are interested in your product, you can then actually reach the specific and correct buyer. So one example of this might be that at a conference or at an event, the person that comes up to your booth might not actually be the target persona that would be making the decision for your business, right? The person that comes to your booth might be a marketing lead, but essentially your target account or your target audience is the finance department of a company. However, you now know that somebody from this company is interested in your product. You can understand that this company is now my target, but when you reach them programmatically through an ABM strategy, you can actually reach the correct buyers, like the finance professional. And then I think the reporting can actually be super valuable as an added layer to that. Because if you maybe don't know who your target persona is, the reporting can kind of give you a little bit of insight into who's actually engaging with your messaging, so that you might just reach that company broadly, But then over the next few weeks, as you're running your targeting strategy, you can hone in further by knowing that, okay, now at this company, I'm getting the most engagement from finance professionals. Maybe that's actually my target decision maker. You can then start to like narrow down your strategy. You can start to narrow down your dollars and build a very target persona based campaign around just the finance professional, differently from maybe that marketing professional that actually came to your booth in the beginning. So I think like really honing in on that you can do online, which you can't really do in person, right? Until you know who your target audience is really helpful in that digital space. And then further downstream, when you're tailoring your actual sales strategy, that's also where that can be really helpful, because now that you know in the digital space, it's the finance professional that's most engaged, most interested in your product, in your messaging. Your sales leads can then later focus their outreach on that professional group as opposed to not the correct target group, right? You don't want to be wasting your meetings or your demo calls with the person that's not going to be making the decision. You want to talk to the people that are going to be your target decision makers. So I think that's really how you can hone in, not just that post event, like 14 days, that immediate strategy, but then also build that longer term sales motion in a more strategic way, tied to the programmatic efforts.
Power of ABM, huh?
Yeah.
Can you share the DPMs or systems that StackAdapt uses to target and identify users?
DMPs?
DMPs, yeah.
I mean, we have a whole identity graph. I know we're integrated with I think it's like, I don't know if Anshul, you could speak more fluidly about this in terms of our identity graph and our spine and how we're able to essentially
Yeah,
take
yeah,
identifiers.
totally. From an ABM perspective specifically, a lot of our data that we ingest from, let's say, third-party data partners that collect and identify professionals, it all syncs into our internal identity graph that will then help you understand users and different touch points across the journey. So because we can connect like the cookies to the IPs, the device IDs in one identity network, that's really what we will leverage when we're trying to connect, okay, who did we identify around a billboard or around a particular out-of-home ad? And then try to understand, trying to reach that same person in the programmatic landscape. So it all ties into like our internal identity graph and connecting that with any third-party data that we might source from external partners as well.
Cool. Next question. Do airports or other high impact units require longer lead times or special approvals? And how far out should we plan?
Yes, great question. And the short answer is yes. Especially airports, every creative gets reviewed by somebody at that airport. As you can imagine, airports are sensitive venues, and it does require pretty thorough, I guess, evaluation in terms of the creative. So we usually recommend, 5 to 10 business, or really it's more like 10 business days before launch is when you should have that creative over to the media owner to approve, or the airport to approve. High impact, you don't need as much of a lead time, but again, all of those creatives are reviewed, and in some scenarios, these media owners really need to get approval from the landlord, because they're working with real estate companies at the end of the day who really own the buildings and have their own brand to think of. We typically don't run into too many issues in terms of B2B brands being flagged. I would say airports in particular, it's very commonplace for B2B brands to be running. If you've ever flown, I'm sure you've seen multiple B2B brands in there. It's very popular. So yeah, I would say airports, 10 days, 10 business days. High impact, usually around 5, you're fine. But this kind of does bring me to another point around creative, where I think the biggest challenges I've seen with launching a campaign on time is usually creative, and making sure that you have the creative ahead of time. It's to spec, it's everything that you wanted. That I feel like it's always like a run up to the launch where creative is coming in last second. So I would say plan appropriately, get creative specs as early as possible. Like push your part. If it's StackAdapt that you're using to run your digital out of home event executions, like push your partners here at StackAdapt to give you those creative specs as early as possible so you can plan accordingly. I would say also tap into any creative services. So we have a creatives team here, that would be happy to support in building out any custom creatives that you need. And then also take into account the different types of creative requirements. So like airports, for instance, there's certain airports, I think specifically in Asia, that require subtle motion is what they call it. They don't They don't support full motion. And like all these nuances, you can get tripped up very easily as you're, spending time, money, and resources to develop these creatives. So like understanding the creative specs and making sure that you're aligned on what your approach is going to be critically important, especially considering the like longer lead time for like an airport where you need like 10, business days. This all stacks up, and that's why creative sometimes is a launch blocker at the end of the day. So super important.
Gotcha. That sounds important. Good that you offer creative support, though. When is ABM the right play versus broader retargeting?
I think that really depends on where you are in building your marketing strategy and what information you have to begin with. So ABM by nature is a much more tailored approach, obviously, because you actually know exactly what your target persona is. You might even know specifically which accounts you want to reach. So when you have like that predefined list of those very high value accounts, or at least a clearer picture of who your ideal customer is, that's really where ABM can help you build a very targeted strategy. If you're much earlier in building that awareness, or are trying to run campaigns that are much more focused on just driving awareness, driving traffic, that's where broader targeting capabilities can be a lot more valuable. But when you're doing something like, actually, that's where, the topic of this webinar is very ideal. It actually is talking about how you can use both strategies in tandem to build more of like a fuller funnel approach. So you can start with that broader targeting through digital out of home, and then hone in on it using ABM downstream.
Right. Does StackAdapt support native ABM audience selection, or do clients need to upload their own account lists?
Yeah, you can do both. Again, it will depend on like what you're trying to achieve. Obviously, if you are trying to retarget from something like this, where you actually have a CRM list of users built up or accounts you want to reach, you can bring in your own account list. You can pull them in from integrations from your CRM as well. But if you don't know, or you're starting out kind of early and you actually want to understand who your target account list would be, or just want to run a broader strategy, you can just build an ABM audience from just like selections in the platform. You can use it. You can build it based off of just like company attributes and persona attributes top down. So you don't have to have an account list.
Gotcha. For budgeting, how would you think about the split between digital out of home and the targeting media that follows?
So what we typically see for retargeting against digital out of home campaigns is, if you're going to include it as all part of the same budget, it's usually around 15, I would say, to the top would be like 30% of that budget would be allocated specifically for retargeting. We also encourage folks to think beyond just like this one budget and say, hey, you now have this rich audience segment of folks that were at CES, or insert the name of the event. And so I wouldn't limit yourself on saying, hey, 15% of this campaign budget is going to be for retargeting, when in fact you can use that audience moving forward. But I would say typically what we see, or like what the standard is that I've seen so far, is around the low end 15%, the high end around 30% of the total budget to be allocated to retargeting.
All right. After we receive the event attendee list, which channels would you recommend we use to retarget with ABM?
Yeah, I think that also really depends on, first of all, when you're doing the retargeting, and then what the objectives are. I think if you're trying to retarget like immediately after an event, using, like mobile app and like channels like that can be very valuable, because you can still continue to capture those users while they're in transit potentially. But really what you're trying to do in a lot of these cases is drive actual engagement and, generate leads, potentially get people to sign up for demos and things like that. So display tends to be a really valuable tactic there. Obviously, if you're continuing to build brand awareness, or you really want to continue awareness with the right people at those accounts, CTV can be a really strong channel, because then you can use CTV and then further connect it downstream to display to further, move your users through the funnel. So it really just depends on what your strategy is, but display is obviously like a really strong one to actually get those engagements and collect that active engagement onto your site.
Can we monitor digital out of home pacing and performance in real time, or is there typically a 24 to 48 hour delay in reporting and attributions?
Yep. So you can monitor digital out of home pacing in real time for programmatic digital out of home campaigns. You can't for IO based buys, only because all of that's happening off platform. But yes, for PG buys and PMP open exchange, so all programmatic digital out of home buys, is all real time reporting in the platform. You can monitor pacing, you can shift budgets, you can add in new creatives, you can more narrowly target, open up, like very flexible, and you are getting that real-time reporting.
If we can only fund 2 venue types, what delivers best for B2B around events?
So this is a tough question because ultimately it's going to depend on like what your budget is. The reason why I say that is if you have a smaller budget, say for an event, say it's like less than $50,000, say it's like $20,000, you're probably going to be looking more at the programmatic side of the house as opposed to direct IO. And if that's the case, you're going to kind of have to see what's available, both from like what actually has inventory or if it's already sold out. And then also what's exactly around or within the specific venues that you're looking. I would say what we most commonly see are folks, especially for the B2B world, airport is far and away the number one that gets the most attention. I think the reason being is being a B2B brand in an airport during an event, it has a somewhat of like a prestige and gives your brand some like validity and recognition in a way that maybe some other channels in terms of like showing up in a bar and a restaurant might not provide. So I think airport is typically like considered premium, brand safe, and like is what a lot of B2B marketers focus on. So I think that's one venue type. And depending on the event, you could actually access specific parts of the airport programmatically. For instance, like you might not have to buy airports through IO. Las Vegas airport, that's not the case. It has to be IO. But there's certain airports, so say JFK, LaGuardia, Newark, that inventory is available through IO, but it's also available programmatically. And depending on the event and the amount of demand that they're seeing, there's opportunities for you to get in there programmatically and not have to be in like a fixed IO type of a buy. The other venue types I would say are, we typically see it's going to be screens that are within close proximity to the actual event location. Usually our buyers are biasing towards outdoor screens. So you could think of that as like urban panels or like on top of like subways. There's like the transit hubs. What else? I would say high impact as well, especially if that's in close proximity to the event location, is one that's heavily sought after, mostly from like a huge branding awareness. We get a lot of those. We want to make a splash this year at insert the name of the event. It really is so event or really it's location specific. Like it really depends on where the event is, and then that gives you an idea of like what inventory is actually available in the airport or around that specific event location. Certain cities and event locations are better than others in terms of like what's actually available from an inventory standpoint. So like a good example is Atlanta. There's Cubicon coming up in a week or two. That's being held at I think the what's it called, World Congress. It's like an event location there that has fantastic inventory all around Centennial Park, which is right around that event location. They have high impact units like right outside. Obviously, Atlanta Airport gets tons of commuters coming in and out of there. So it really is like an event by event or location by location type of a decision. And ultimately, I would again go back to use forecasting, understand what's available around the event location. Is there inventory available in airports? And really kind of have to understand the makeup of the inventory within the specific locations that you're looking to run in to give you an idea of like how am I going to maximize my budget here? What's going to make the most impact? And I would say lean on your partners like StackAdapt to help guide you in those types of decisions, just because we've worked on a number of these before in the past and have seen success in different approaches. And we will often work against what is your budget and work backwards from that.
Helpful. Cool. Well, that looks like the end of our Q&A and we're out of time, so it works out perfect. Thank you so much, Nick and Anshul, for an amazing presentation. Thanks again to StackAdapt for sponsoring today's presentation. And audience, we truly value your feedback, so please click on the link that should be popping up on your screen shortly. We'll also be posted into the chat. Fill out a short survey to share your thoughts on today's session. Thanks again for joining us, and I can't wait to see you at our next Marketing Profs event. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.